Video, I'm going to show you how to write a simple calculator application using HTML, CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. So at the moment I've got two programs open. On the left side of my screen is my text editor. Now if you're using Windows, your text editor might be Notepad++, and there's other editors available. If you're on Mac, just go to a search engine, have a look for a Mac text editor. Again, there's lots of options, but please remember that a text editor is different from a word processor. So you can't use Microsoft Word to create these kinds of files. You need a pure text editor to do it. Now on the right is my browser. I'm using Firefox, but you can use Chrome or some other browser which you like. Okay, so if I go into my text editor, hopefully you'll remember this from last time. The first thing I do is type this doc type, and this tells anybody reading the file that this file is written in HTML. Now to start my HTML file, I put an HTML tag, and every tag in HTML needs to have an ending, so I'll also write the ending tag like this. It's the same as the start tag but with an extra slash to say that this is the end. Okay, now the stuff which appears on the page of an HTML file, I put it inside the body tag like this, and I'm going to put a heading. So a heading in HTML is H1 for heading 1, and since this is a calculator app, I'll just put the heading calculator. Now guys, I could put this calculator on a new line like this in order to match up the start and end tags, but this uses quite a lot of space. What I tend to do is, if the thing in the middle is very simple, then I'll put it all on one line like this. So I only split it up into multiple lines if the bit in the middle is more complicated. Okay, so now I'm going to save that. So I'll go to my save button, and I'm going to put it on my desktop. Now I've made a folder called calculator, so I'll put it in the calculator folder. It's good to have a folder because you're going to have multiple files to work with, so keep them all together. Don't let them all be mixed up with other things on your disk. Okay, now I have to give it a name, so I'm going to call it calculator.html, and the name needs to end in .html so that, again, when the browser reads the file, it knows from the ending of the file, the .html file extension, that this is an HTML file. And if I save that, then because I put .html on the end, my text editor now switches to HTML mode and everything is colored in. Okay, so now I've written this text file, I'm going to look in my calculator folder. There's my HTML file. Now remember, if you're using Windows, you might not see the .html at the end. If you want to see the .html, go to your View menu on Windows and tick the View File Extensions box so that the .html shows up. Okay, so I can drag my HTML file over to my browser, and when I let go, there is the title. It's not much of a web page yet, or an app, but it's a start. Okay, so let's start building the calculator. Now I'm going to use the HTML table command to do this. So the first thing I'll do is write table, and of course I need a end, so I'll put /table. Okay, now inside the table I'm going to have rows and columns. So first of all I'll put table row, which is just tr, and /tr. This is going to be the first row of my table. Now I think my table is going to have probably 5 columns across, and I'm not sure how many rows down yet, but let's say it's 5 columns, so that means that I'm going to put TD for table data, and because the top row is just going to be a display which stretches across the entire calculator, I'll put colspan equals 5. Now if you're not sure about that at the moment, then don't worry, it's going to become clear as we get further into the video. Now I just put a bit of text here, so I'll put display because this is going to be the calculator display. Okay, now let's add another table row. Okay, now this table row is just going to be full of buttons, so I'll put TD for table data. This is going to be one cell of my table, and inside here I'm going to have a button, so I'll put button. Let's make this button number 9. Okay, now I can start copying and pasting. So I want 5 buttons on this row, so here's my 5 buttons. So let's make this 8 and 7, and then I don't know exactly what appears on a calculator or what buttons the orders are normally in, but let's put plus and minus on this row. Okay, so now if I save that and then reload on my browser, you can see that I've got the display area, which is this bit up the top, and I've got the first row of buttons down here. Now if I click on a button, nothing happens at the moment. That's the thing that we're going to have to look at in a minute. But the buttons are sort of laid out in a grid arrangement. So I think it's time for us to start putting a little bit of JavaScript code to make stuff happen. So up the top I'm going to put head and /head. Now the head area is where we can write information which is not designed to display on the page. Okay, so the body area is where we write the things that show on the page, the text, and the head area is where we write extra information which can tell the browser where to find programs or styles, other information like that. Now in this case I'm going to point the browser to a program that I'm going to write, so I'll put script source equals calculator.js, and then I'll need to put a /script tag. Okay, so what this is saying is that there is a script file, a JavaScript file, and it's called calculator.js. Obviously .js means JavaScript, and then I've got a /script here, which is necessary because I've got to close the HTML tag. So I'm going to save that back. Now I need to create a new file, so let's create a new file, and this is going to be my JavaScript file. And what I'll do in my JavaScript file is I'm going to write a function, and I'll call this function, let's call it add to, no, I want to keep it small, so let's call it display. Okay, now functions in JavaScript are a little bit similar to functions in Python, but they don't look exactly the same. So you need to have this word function in the beginning, and you need to have curly brackets around the function. So we're only going to stick with really simple JavaScript at the moment. Don't worry, I'm not going to bury you in a mountain of JavaScript code. What I want to do is, first of all, I'm going to put something on the display. Now, to do that, inside this part of my HTML code where I've made the display, I need to put an ID. So I'm going to choose an ID screen, okay, and that name is how I'm going to refer to that part of my HTML file later on. So if I want to change what's on the calculator screen, then what I do is, in my JavaScript file, first of all I say let element equal document.getElement by ID screen. Now what this does, it says to the browser, please find in this HTML document the thing which I've labeled with an ID. The ID is screen. So the browser will look through this document, it will find out there is where the ID is screen, and it will allow me to control this part of the document and change what it says. So I can do something like, for example, element dot text content equals hello. Okay. Now, guys, when you type this in, you have to be a little bit careful because the case matters. Okay, so if you get, if this isn't working for you in a minute, then make sure that you've capitalized the correct letters. Okay, get element by ID has capital E, capital B, capital I. and text content has a capital C there. Okay, so I'm going to go to save, and I'm going to save it in the same folder as calculator.html, but I'm going to call it calculator.js for JavaScript. Now, just like when I saved the HTML file and I got color, when I save the JavaScript file, my text editor recognizes that this is JavaScript, so it puts color into the JavaScript code. Makes it easier to read. Okay, so I've made this JavaScript code, and what it's going to do is it's going to get control of this part of the display, and then it's going to say hello on the display. But when is that code going to happen? Well, what I need to do is connect clicking the button to running that piece of code. So what I do is after the button tag here, I put onClick equals, and then in quotation marks, JavaScript colon display 9. Okay. Now that's gone a little bit over the edge of the screen, so I'm just going to see if I can configure my tab size. There we go. That gives me a little bit more space without going over the edge of the screen. So here's my opening tag button, and here's my closing tag button, and here is the command which says when I click that button, I want to do the JavaScript function which is called display. Here it is, there's the JavaScript function, and when I display something I need to provide some text, and what I'm providing is actually the number 9. Now if this was Python, Python would complain because 9 isn't text, it's an integer. But JavaScript is a little bit more forgiving, so if you ask for text but then you provide an integer, then JavaScript will convert it into text when you need it. So I'm going to save that. So I've saved both files. Make sure you save both files and then click reload here. Now if it's working correctly, when you click the number 9, the text on the display should change to say hello. Okay, let's just watch that again. So I reload the page, I click number 9, and the display text changes to hello. Okay, well that's fine, but what I really want the display to say is 9. So let's change that. What I'll do is I'll say element.textContent equals element.textContent plus 9. Plus text. Okay, and now if I save that and reload, I've got display, and when I press 9, it adds 9s on the end of the display. Okay, getting closer to a very basic calculator. Let's get rid of that display text and reload, and then put 9 in. Okay, and I can fill up that calculator with 9s. So now have a go at writing the same on-click for each of these 8, 7, plus and minus buttons, okay, so that you can write onto the display with these other buttons. Just pause the video for a second and see if you can do that. Okay, so guys, here's what you should have. I'm just going to copy and paste this into each space, and then change these values. Now there's a little bit of a catch when I come to the plus and minus, because I can write 9, 8 and 7 here fine, but plus, it is supposed to be text, so JavaScript can't convert a plus into text automatically. What I'll have to do is put that plus inside quotation marks. Now I'm just using the single quotation marks here. Okay, so I've got double quotation marks here connected to the on-click, but I've just got single quotation marks here. Okay, now the reason I use double quotation marks here and single quotation marks here is so that they don't get confused, so that the computer doesn't get confused. It doesn't actually matter which quotation marks you use, as long as the start quotation mark and the end quotation mark are the same type of quotation mark. So if I hit reload now, I can type a number as long as it's only got 9, 8 and 7 in it. So let's do 897 plus. Okay, and there's my calculator. Okay, I can write things onto the display now. Okay, let's try adding another row to my calculator. So again, copy and paste is your friend. I'm just going to paste out another row. Let's have 6, 5, 4, and I'm going to have a what shall I put in here? I'll put a clear button, and I'll put an equals button. So the layout might not be very professional. You guys can change your calculator's layout, but at the moment I just want to keep it as simple as possible. So I better change this text as well. And save, and then hit reload here. Okay, now I've got more buttons on my calculator. I'm not sure that that clear button is too good, but we can change the styling in a little bit. So I can write out a few more numbers now. Okay, but the equals button just prints equals, and what I really want to do is when I press the equals button, I want that sum to be evaluated and converted into an answer. Okay, well fortunately that's not too tricky either. What I'll do is I'll write a function here called answer. Now in the function answer I put element.textContent equals eval element.textContent and save. Now inside my equals sign, instead of doing the display function, okay, which adds something to the display, I want to do the answer function. So I write answer, open and close brackets, and save that. So this equals button is a little bit different to the other buttons, okay, but when I hit reload, and then I put 8 plus 7, hit equals, and I get an error. Great. Okay, what have I done wrong? Let's look at the web console. Element is not defined because I forgot that line. Okay. So sorry guys, you needed that line. I'm being a bit silly. Right, let's try again. See if this works. 8 plus 7 equals 15. There we go. Okay. So now we've got a calculator where we can type in some sums and actually evaluate them. Now at the moment my calculator doesn't have a clear button, so I can keep adding stuff, but what I can't do is clear and get back to the starting point. So what I'll do now is I'm going to implement the clear button. Now the clear button will also need a new function, so let's create a function clear. And you might be able to write this function yourself based on what you've seen earlier in the video. So if you think that you can, just pause the video for a second and try writing this function. And if not, I'm going to give you the answer in about 2 seconds. Okay, so here's the answer. All you've got to do is instead of adding text to what's already on the screen, you just set the screen to an empty string. Okay, now I've got to go back and change this to my clear command and save that. Now when I've saved both of them, reload. Let's try typing some stuff and hitting the clear button. Great, doesn't work. Okay. What mistake did I make this time? I might have to look at the web console again. Okay, Unfortunately, it is in the nature of things that sometimes they don't work. Please bear with me a moment while I try and figure this out. Okay, it's not running the function. So let's try changing the name. I'll use reset. There we go. Okay, so guys, I think it was probably the name clear. I shouldn't have chosen the name clear. So this is a little bit of a problem with JavaScript because some of the names have special meanings, and if you use a name with special meaning, it might get replaced with the browser. So let's use the name reset instead of clear. Okay, so here's my reset command. Okay, so now I can write some numbers on my JavaScript display. Press equals, there's my answer, hit clear, and it resets the calculator. So far so good, but it's not a very beautiful calculator, and it doesn't have all of the buttons. Now I'm not going to put all of the buttons on, I'm going to leave that to you guys, but let's have a look at how I could change the appearance of the calculator. So you might remember that to change the way that something looks, we need to use CSS. So I'm going to write link rel equals style sheet href equals calculator.css. Now you probably would expect me to have to write /link here. This is actually one of very few special circumstances where I don't need to put a slash, so I can just write link. It's an inconsistency that exists for historical reasons, really. So this tells my browser that I have a style sheet, a CSS style sheet, which is connected to this file, and it's going to be called calculator.css. So let's make that style sheet. I'm going to hit plus up here, and the first thing I always do with the style sheet is try to change the background color, because that tells you that the style sheet is working. So I'll put background color, don't forget to use the American spelling, and let's make a nice sickly green. So now I'll save that. It needs to go in the same folder as all of my other calculator files, so I'll call it calculator.css and put it in the same folder. There we go, and when I save it with .css, again you can see the browser starts coloring things in, because now it knows that it is a CSS file. So now I hit reload, and super, my background has changed, so I know that my style sheet is working. Now I don't necessarily want a green background, so I'm going to change that back to, let's make a light grey. So that should give us a light grey. Now I want to change the styles of some other things. So first of all, if something has an ID, I can change the style by putting hash symbol and then the IDs like this. So hash screen, this is going to change the style of the calculator's screen. So what do I want the screen to look like? Well, I think I want the background color to be a sort of yellow. And I would like the font to be a monospace font. I want the font color to be black, so let's put those together. Let's see what that looks like at the moment. Okay, that's not too bad. I think I probably want the font to be larger. Okay, that's better. Now I also want the numbers to align to the right hand side. Let's reload. Okay, great. Now another problem I've got is that when it starts off, there's nothing in the display, which means that it's flat, and then it's only when I start writing numbers that the display opens up. So there's a couple of different ways to handle that, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the size, and let's set the size to, let's try 1M, see if this works. That's a little bit small, so let's try 1.5 M. So an M, you might remember, is the width of the letter M, and it's quite commonly used in web design to measure the size of different fonts. Okay, there we go, that's looking better. Now I think it probably also needs a border around the outside, so let's do a border, 1 pixel wide, solid black border should be okay. Let's try that. Okay, not bad. So that works okay for a display. Okay. Now let's make the buttons look a bit better. So if I go back to HTML, remember that I use the button tag to create a button. So I'm going to go back to my CSS and write button. Now what would I like the buttons to look like? Well, the first thing is I think I would like them to have a width of 5M maybe. Let's try that and see if that's too crazy. No, that looks fine. Okay, so the width looks fine. Now let's make the height something similar. And reload. There we are. Now those square buttons, do I like them? I think I do. I think they're not bad. I might change the size a little bit. How about 4M? Is that a bit better? That looks a bit better. I think 5M was a little bit too much. Now I can also make the font size bigger. Okay, that's made it really big. I didn't want the font size to be quite as big as that. I think the reason might be the padding. So let's try to reduce the padding. No. In that case, I'm just going to try to work out why the buttons are so big. Sometimes a little bit of detective work is required. So fortunately a browser shows you here, and it's actually showing me that the padding is not a problem. It looks like the border looks quite wide. Am I misunderstanding that? I'm not entirely sure why the buttons are appearing so big there, but it might take a little bit more work to figure that out. What happens if I make the font size bigger? Oh, that's too big. Okay, so guys, definitely a lot of experimentation is required with CSS. I am not at all an expert in CSS, so I'm going to have to fiddle about with this for a little while to get it to look right, and that isn't going to make a fun video. So I'll leave that for now, but I think that you guys should have enough there that you know how to build your calculator, and the task that I want to leave you with is building the rest of the calculator. So you're going to need to add in the rest of the keypad. I think probably rearrange some of these buttons into different places. Okay, you'll need to add a times and a divide button. Now remember that the divide symbol in JavaScript or Python or pretty much any programming language is a slash, just like the slash that we use in HTML for the end tag. Okay, so that is what we use for the division symbol. Now you can actually have a slash inside the program, but you could have a proper divide symbol on the button. So there is a proper division symbol. If you're not sure what it is, then just try using a search engine and search for Unicode division sign, and it should show you that symbol, which you could then just copy and paste into your HTML. Okay, so there is a proper symbol. You can use the symbol, but in the program itself you'll have to use the slash. Okay, guys, I hope that gives you everything you need to build a pretty cool desktop calculator, and you could even add that calculator to your start page if you're somebody that uses calculator on your computer quite a lot, and then it can be a handy thing to have on your start page. Thank you very much.